There are stories that seem to have been written to prove that human vanity has a price, and sometimes that price is life itself. This is the story of Eben Byers, a man who shone in every sense, even literally. In 1927, Byers was everything American society admired. Millionaire, athlete, influential, and owner of a flawless smile. Heir to one of the largest industrial fortunes in the United States, he lived among golf clubs, luxury trips, and magazine headlines. But what no one could imagine is that behind that healthy and confident face, a tragedy was beginning to form, one that would become one of the most macabre stories of the 20th century. It all started with something simple, a pain in the arm. After a fall during a train trip, Eben felt a persistent inflammation. A doctor recommended a new scientific miracle that was enchanting the elite. Radithor, a radioactive drink that promised to cure anything, give energy, and even slow down aging. It was a small bottle with a clear liquid and an elegant label that read, "A genuine solution of radium in triple distilled water." At that time, radium was the symbol of the future. Scientists called it the energy of life. Newspapers spoke of it as an elixir of vigor, and companies put it in creams, toothpaste, chocolates, and even underwear. The word radioactive was synonymous with modernity, and Eben Byers believed it, like so many others. He began drinking 1 bottle a day, then 2 and soon 3. In a short time, his life became a ritual of luxury and self-destruction. The healthiest man in American society was drinking liquid radiation. The effects began subtly: an inexplicable fatigue, then headaches, weight loss, insomnia. But Eben, convinced that the elixir was only expelling impurities from his body, continued. If he felt unwell, he drank more Radithor. Gradually, the invisible poison began to devour his body from within. His teeth started to loosen. Open wounds appeared on his jaw, and what doctors discovered next seemed impossible. His skull was literally disintegrating. The radium accumulated in his bones was burning the structure from the inside out. Eben Byers, the man who symbolized vitality, was becoming a living corpse. Meanwhile, the company behind the product, Bailey Radium Laboratories, kept profiting. The creator of Radithor, William J. A. Bailey, a fake doctor without a license, claimed his tonic was scientifically proven and that celebrities used it to maintain vigor. It was the peak of the radium age, a race for atomic energy long before its danger was understood. As months passed, Eben's body began to glow faintly in the dark. Doctors, horrified, realized that he literally emitted radiation, but it was too late. The poison had infiltrated his bones, blood, and vital organs. In 1931, newspapers began to discreetly report his condition, but the truth was revealed only after his death. Byers's body was so contaminated that decades later, when scientists opened his coffin, the radiation was still present. He had become a tragic symbol of blind faith in commercial science, a martyr of radioactive marketing. But what happened next was even more sinister. Because the case of Eben Byers not only exposed the dangers of radium, it revealed a secret about American industry and the manipulation of science that still echoes in the shadows of modern history. When Eben Byers died in 1932, silence was the first reaction. High society, used to seeing his name in prestigious columns, now saw it in headlines, but with a word no one expected: radioactivity. The newspapers tried to soften it. They said Byers had fallen ill from overuse of tonics. But just one look at his picture, if anyone had the courage to look, was enough to see that it wasn't merely illness. It was disintegration. His face, once a symbol of elegance, was deformed. His jaw had practically disappeared. Radium had consumed bones, gums, and teeth, and the glow that had promised eternal life had left only darkness. The Federal Trade Commission was forced to act. A full investigation was opened into Bailey Radium Laboratories, the company responsible for Radithor. And what they discovered was terrifying. There was no scientific basis, no clinical study, no medical authorization. The tonic was just water mixed with radioactive salts, bottled and sold as a miracle cure. In the 1920s, the United States was at the height of faith in science. It was the decade of inventions, electricity, chemistry, the promise of a future without disease. And in that environment, radium became a luxury product. Companies sold cosmetics with radioactive particles that rejuvenated. There were toothpastes that whitened with atomic energy. Even chocolates and butter carried the name radium, and the slogans were hypnotic. Drink the glow of life, eternal energy in a bottle, Radithor, vitality that comes from the atom. The rich wanted novelty, doctors wanted fame, and the danger was invisible. After all, radium had no smell, no taste, no color, but it had something seductive: power. Eben Byers became the perfect example of how science, when placed in the wrong hands, can become a tool of destruction, disguised as progress. When the US government finally began to investigate, it was too late. William Bailey, the creator of Radithor, continued selling his product even after the complaints. He even declared in interviews, "Mr. Byers was a healthy man. He just overdid the dose. It was a cruel irony." The same poison he produced was slowly killing hundreds of people. But like many industrial tragedies of the time, the case was hushed up. Bailey was never arrested. He never returned the money, and until his death in 1949, he continued selling energy supplements under different names. Byers's body, on the other hand, was buried in a lead-lined coffin in an isolated tomb to contain the contamination. Even so, when his grave was opened in 1965 for scientific examination, instruments detected high levels of radiation. More than 30 years later, he still glowed in the dark. The death of Byers marked the end of an era of scientific naivety. It forced the United States to create the first laws regulating radioactive products and opened the way to a new understanding of both the power and danger of the atom. But it also left a cultural scar. The idea that something invisible could corrode a human body down to the bone inspired fear, fascination, and horror. And that mix of emotions would give rise, in the following decades, to an entire genre: radioactive monster movies, mutation stories, and Cold War fears. The case of Eben Byers was not just a personal tragedy. It was the warning of a nuclear future yet to come. But there's a detail few know. A lost document in the Federal Trade Commission archives suggests that Byers's body was not the only one to show post-mortem luminescence, and that Radithor may have been just the tip of a network of experiments involving the deliberate use of radiation in humans. Decades before the first atomic bombs, the case of Eben Byers didn't end with his death. In fact, it was the beginning of an even darker revelation, one that exposed how far humanity can go when curiosity and profit intertwine. While newspapers tried to bury the story, scientists began investigating another group of radium victims, the so-called radium girls. They were young factory workers who, in the 1910s and 1920s, painted watch dials with radioactive paint. They were instructed to lick the brush to make it finer. Without knowing it, they swallowed microdoses of radium every day. Soon they began to fall ill. Their teeth fell out, jaws decayed, and their bodies, like Byers's, glowed in the dark. These women were silenced, ridiculed, and abandoned. But over time, the lawsuits they filed against the radioactive watch companies became historic. The first legal victories for workers' rights against radiation exposure. Decades later, researchers discovered something disturbing. The body of Eben Byers and those of the radium girls still emitted measurable radiation even after more than half a century. But there's another detail few know. In internal Federal Trade Commission reports, There are mentions of a series of preserved samples of blood and bones from Radithor victims. These samples were allegedly used in secret experiments during the 1940s, when the US government began studying the effects of radium and plutonium on living organisms. In other words, the body of Eben Byers may have involuntarily contributed to the studies that culminated in the development of the atomic bomb. Eben Byers believed radium would bring eternal life. In a way, it did. More than 90 years later, his tomb remains dangerous. Radiation is still detectable, and the name Byers still shines in the pages of history as an eternal warning. Today, when we speak of nuclear energy, when we look at reactors, medical treatments, or atomic weapons, there is always a shadow behind these discoveries, the shadow of a man who believed in a miracle and found death inside the bottle. Decades after his death, Eben Byers' grave still emits a pale glow that no one dares to touch. Clay Silent Cemetery in Pennsylvania holds the man who was once the symbol of American elegance, now turned into a radioactive fossil. But the true horror of his story lies not only in what radium did to his body, it lies in what it revealed about human nature. In an era obsessed with progress, Byers' suffering was ignored. Society preferred to believe in the promise of a miracle cure than face the fact that science can also destroy. And that's the darkest part of his story. He didn't die from poison alone. He died from a lie sold as hope. At the dawn of the 20th century, the world believed anything was possible. Electricity illuminated cities, automobiles transformed distances, and radium promised eternal energy. But the case of Eben Byers showed the price of scientific arrogance, when the pursuit of innovation surpasses respect for life. His body was the laboratory, his pain the experiment, and his death the warning no one wanted to hear. Years later, when the Manhattan Project gave birth to the atomic bomb, many of the scientists who handled uranium and plutonium knew Byers' story. They wore gloves, masks, and lead suits. And yet some whispered, "The man who glowed first." The name Byers became legend, the first martyr of the atom. Today, Radithor is remembered as one of the greatest medical scandals in history. But the irony persists. In modern laboratories, radium is still used to treat cancer. The same substance that destroyed Eben Byers now saves lives. Perhaps that is the duality of science. The same hand that creates can destroy, and the same glow that illuminates can blind. If we were to open Byers' tomb today, detection instruments would still record dangerous levels of radiation. He has literally become an atomic witness, a body that continues to speak, even after death. The case of Eben Byers was the first warning of an era to come, the era in which the invisible power of the atom would shape wars, cures, and fears. From Hiroshima to Chernobyl, from military experiments to radiological therapies, the shadow of Byers lingers over all. He was the omen of a world that would learn through pain that playing with the invisible has consequences. And while his story is told in whispers, the echo of radiation continues to travel. Silent, eternal, immortal. In 1965, scientists opened Eben Byers' tomb for measurements. The body was still radioactive. The flesh was gone, but the bone, what radium loved most, remained solid and lethal. The detector flickered. The needle trembled, and someone whispered among the researchers, "He still glows." The glow that promised life became the symbol of death. But his story survived. And today, more than 90 years later, it still makes us ask, how far will humanity go in the name of progress? The end of Eben Byers is not just a medical report, it's a mirror, a reflection of our own obsession with power, youth, and the promise of eternity. He was the man who drank the future and found the end. But the story of Eben Byers was not the end. It was only the first warning. Decades later, the same glow that slowly killed one man would be released on a scale the world had never imagined. A green, silent glow that turned an ordinary night into an eternal nightmare. The name of that place is Chernobyl. If you believe that some stories must be remembered so they never happen again, subscribe now to Authentic Mysteries. Here, every episode is a real journey into the unknown, where truth is more terrifying than any fiction. Leave your like, share the video, and tell us in the comments if they promised you eternal youth.